Anthony Mackie, who plays Captain America in the Falcon in the Marvel movies, has come under fire for some of his recent comments about masculinity. He actually went as far as saying that we are living through the death of the American male. But whoa. What is a man? He goes on to actually detail some aspects of what it means to be a man and how he's raising his son. And his critics have responded in glorious fashion to that as well. They've called him such things as a homophobe and as a chauvinist. I even read one comment that went as far as to say that he is an abusive father. Such comments about real masculinity, they can exist in gay communities, and even they can exist among women or in women. So we just have to figure this out. The stats ring true that 4 out of 5 suicides here in America are men. We also see that 50% of young men are not pursuing relationships, and 80% of those men say it's because they don't want to be creepy when approaching women. So something's not working. And I guess we want to ask that question is the American male really dead? So let's unpack these statements, see if there's things wrong or right about them, and talk about what it means to be a real man and provide clarity to this. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. We are excited to talk to you. We are your host. I'm John Heinen here in Texas where the weather is great. And we've got Devin Schadt there in Iowa where the weather's
not so great.
Not so great. We are living through one of the 2 months out of the year.
They used to have like a sign that, like when you entered the state of Iowa said, "Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa." I'm wondering if it's hell. Is this hell? No, it's Iowa.
It's our Lord's beta testing. Maybe purgatory or
yeah. Well, Iowa's the place for you if you want to get your purgatory done quickly.
Pay now, pay later, as we say. So we're excited about coming at you guys, our listeners, today on another week here. If you like what we're talking about, head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus, where we now have 22 sessions devoted to men. We've got another one coming out each month coming up. We also have a bunch of free books and more content. We're over 100 exclusive, unique videos for men. It's a great way to support us. In fact, talking about support here, I am in the process of building out a Catholic Gentleman studio. It's going to be a home for the Catholic Gentleman. We're going to have live in-person interviews. We're going to have mini courses and a place that we can call our own. I couldn't be more excited about this, but we're about 2/3 of the way there through the donations that we need. So if you are inspired, if you have means, no amount is too small. Head over to catholicgentleman.com/support or click on that link in the show note. Give anything you can. I've got a lot of free gifts that I'm giving, including letting you choose an episode show topic and getting a shout out during that show topic. So anyways, really appreciate all of our supporters and our help. You make this possible by liking, by sharing, by expanding this podcast to your friends that could benefit from it. And we couldn't be more grateful for you guys, our listeners. So, Devin, when you saw this video by Anthony Mackie, what was your first and initial response?
Yeah, well, my first response was go get him, Tiger. Yay, way to go. Finally a secular voice, not finally, but a secular voice is, he's stating his belief on masculinity and the culture. And he's coming out from a very secular standpoint, but stating a lot of the things that I think that we've been saying for years. So that was really encouraging. I think that one of the things that struck me is so he's saying the American male is dead. And I love the reaction of one of the guys on the pivot. He's like, yeah, he just like, he's like, what? So I think my first reaction was the reactions to what he said. I thought it was just so enlightening to get a take on the culture because like you had people saying, what does being a man and a father have to do with raising boys? Yeah. And I'm like, what? I can't believe that someone would actually say that, and then they accused him of being homophobic, like you said in the introduction there. And it's like, wait a minute. Is he homophobic or are you just fatherphobic? Because what I'm finding is that he didn't say anything that challenged homosexuality or homosexual unions or anything. But what he did do is he proclaimed the truth of masculinity according to him, which I think that he was pretty close. I mean, I think he did a good job. But I question it. Is the American male really dead?
And I father-phobic, I think that's a really good response, because when I started reading some of those negative comments, I didn't actually pick up on that at all. But again, I think we're so sided with what he is, but it triggered people, right? There's this idea that any form of masculinity distinct from femininity, therefore, is outdated, is toxic, is against modern advancements and enlightenment. And so we should just ignore it and not talk about it. And then we're talking about this man, Anthony, who I didn't know prior to this episode, but he has 4 sons. And so great. We've got a dad who's actually lived, he's got a 15-year-old son being his oldest, who's actually lived raising 4 boys, and he's willing to speak out of his failings and the successes. And I completely agreed with what you were saying, and I do, if our listeners, we're about to play this video so that we're going to watch this 2-3 minute little clip here of Anthony Mackie. And if you find something that he's saying that you agree with or disagree with, please drop it in the comments. We want to hear your voices as well, because as you just stated, Devin, it resonated with me. Right when I heard it, I was like, that's what's up. Yeah, let's do this, and I was really impressed. You're spot on about the comments, to the point where I watched the guys on The Pivot. They do kind of like a 20-minute show recap after they've had a guest on that they interview. And they talked about this particular issue for quite a while. And they all really, really appreciated his stance on it and stated very similar. Like he got most of it right. And I really appreciate him coming out so boldly and courageously. And man, his sons are going to see that and they're going to feel the same thing about, about their father. So what do you think, Devin? Should we just dive in and take a watch of this video?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Awesome. Let's watch it now.
That's where we came from. I keep my boys humble. Like, my boys have never had a pair of Jordans. My boys don't do all that internet fly. I'm like your kids. And no, I don't give a fuck. I could be the biggest star in the world. Do not let me catch you being stupid. Mm-hmm. Do not. And my oldest gets it. My 15-year-old, he tells the other ones, he's like, yo, don't make dad mad. Because once you get one that's right, he gonna straighten the other ones out. Mm-hmm. So it's just that thing of, in the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities, for one reason or another. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. Right. But my boys will always be respectful. They will always say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am. They will always say thank you. They will always open the door for a lady. They will always make sure that their mother is taken care and provided for. They will always be men. And that's always, since they were 2 years old. Every time I left for a job, I tell my 15-year-old, you're the man of the house. Mm. You make sure these doors are locked every night, this alarm is on, you text me or you call me every night before you go to bed and you wake up.
I love that.
Because we're men. If I'm not there to protect, he got to be there to protect. Because you can have all the money in the world, motherfucker climb through the window, that money means nothing. Right. You can have all the celebrity in the world, motherfucker jump through the door, that celebrity means nothing. Yeah. So you got to have a little guard in there, And so for me, it's always that idea of American masculinity is very different.
So that was fun. There was a lot. I actually want to do a little shout out to the guys on The Pivot. They actually bleep out all the cuss words. They do that in post editing. So good for them. That wasn't something that I needed to do. So that was fun and appreciative. And so Devin, there's a lot that we can unpack from his comments here, and there's a lot of what it means to be a man that I hope that we can unfold. But before we do that, because even if we accept Mackie's premise that there's the decline of traditional masculinity here in America, I would argue that the evidence suggests that it's actually worse and than he's expressing. And he says over the past 2 decades, and I'd love for you to kind of set the stage in that aspect, because I know you've got some stats and things of that nature, especially when we're talking about the death of masculinity, but also fatherhood and the importance of fatherhood as it relates to sons, because there's just a lot to unpack here. So what are your thoughts on regarding this downward decline?
Yeah, when he speaks the death of the American male, when he says that, and, I love the reaction of one of the guys on the pivot, he's like, that surprised him. It caught him off guard. And I think it's a fair statement. What we're talking about, this is kind of the problem, though. What does it mean for the death of the American male, other than the American male's soul to be hollowed out, right? And you're right. I mean, true manhood finds its pinnacle in spiritual fatherhood. And that's what I love about Mackie in this interview, is that without him even knowing it, he says, I tell my sons to be real men. And everything is about him being a real father. Everything is about him raising his child to be men, which demands his fatherhood. So we find right there that manhood and fatherhood are intrinsically linked. But no, our culture doesn't believe this, right? I mean, have you noticed that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We can be men absent of fatherhood. We can be men absent of spiritual fatherhood. But like we've gone over the stats a million times about how if the father is the first to convert to Christianity, or if the mother is the first to convert to Christianity, there's a 17% probability that the family will follow. But if the father's the first, there's a 93% probability that the family will follow. Or dads have twice as much influence in helping their teens stave off premarital sex. But what we're talking about, though, is that when we say the death of the American male, you cannot lead if you're not actually mastering yourself. And this is interesting about Mackie. Okay, so he's a very popular individual. He's a celebrity. He has all the money in the world, really.
Yep.
And he's not buying his kids Jordans. Okay, that seems odd to me. Like that's like really a wild approach, right? Usually, if we have any money, we're buying our kids what we would have wanted when we were kids. So I think that he's mastering himself somewhere in there, at least it sounds like, and so he can give what he possesses. But when you look at our culture, what is it? 70% of men roughly are using pornography regularly.
Yeah.
What that means is then they are in mortal sin, or they're at the very least, they're operating from a very selfish disposition, right? Well, therefore, what are they giving? You can't give what you don't have, and you only give what you do have. So if I am using on the inside, that's what I'm giving on the outside. I'm objectifying using. So anyway, I just think that the death of the American male is a true occurrence. However, I think the American male is actually being resurrected right now.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, and I think, okay, so let's talk about that, it being resurrected, because one of the thoughts that I had is that while it has been dying, it's been stripped away of previous markers and different cultural markers and things of that nature, some of which he brings in. I'd say, I mean, maybe you'd agree or not, but there's no clear or constructive alternative to what it means to be a man. So we've got guys like Mackie that come out with traditional views. And that's something that has meat on it. That's something that people can bite into and can follow through, right? We've got Brett McKay in Art of Manliness, and he comes out with one listology after the other, 50 books every man should read, how to start a fire with 2 sticks, how to start a life raft if you don't have anything but your pants, like all of these sort of things. And they attract to men, right? Because there's a certain degree of ability to control your environment, to be knowledgeable in a certain area, or to be able to handle whatever life throws at you. And so, but again, we get to that point of like, what does it mean to be a man? And the alternative is just directionless. It's uncertain. I guess the liberal progressive alternative is just uncertain. It's directionless. It's weak, right? There's not any sort of, it's this universal, like effeminate, that we all just need to get along and be the same. And at least that's what I read into it when I am trying to discern what the progressive movement is trying to define as masculinity, in opposition to somebody like Mackie, who just comes out and states some very traditional values. You see that as well? I guess that my question
that's really good. So at the heart of it, this is what's going on, I think, is that what is the meaning and a value of a man? What is the meaning and value of a man? A man is only his value. Okay. What is the meaning and value of a protector? Because Anthony Mackie talks about being a protector, right?
Yeah.
The meaning and value of a protector is only as esteemed and high or great as the value of what he's protecting. So if I am protecting a garbage dump, nobody cares.
Right.
If I am a mall cop, nobody cares. But if I am protecting an ancient artifact in a museum that is worth millions or tens of millions of dollars, people care. If I am protecting the president and I'm one of his security guards, people care. I'm important. So the value of the protector is associated directly and correlates directly to that which he is protecting. So St. Joseph, he was hailed by Paul VI, John Paul II, Augustine, and Ambrose, and Aquinas, saying that he was given the task of caring for God's most precious gifts, treasures, God's most precious treasures. This is in the apostolic letter on St. Joseph as guardian, Custos. I'm sorry, I lost it there.
Yeah.
Redemptoris Custos. Okay, so, but St. Joseph, he has the greatest treasures that have been placed in his possession, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he's so valuable. That's why he's such an incredible patron for our church. So then God not only places these incredible treasures in his hands for his protection, but also the church. He's patron of the church. We men, we are valued to the level of what we value. So if I am just protecting my money and putting it in the bank, that's my value. That's my importance. And guess what? When I'm gone, nobody's going to care. Right. But if my value is based on that which I'm protecting, which is my family, which is my marriage, which is the infant in the womb, which is Jesus in the Eucharist, which is my faith, which is my morality, which is a Catholic church, then I'm highly valued.
Covering it all. That's exactly right. I think that's so good. And I just resonating with, we've been talking about sacrifice on the last handful of episodes, and two things came into my mind while you were talking, is that Chesterton's famous quote of, a soldier fights not for what he hates that is in front of him, but he fights for what he loves that is behind him. And at the same time, right, we sacrifice for that which we love. And those two themes just kind of kept on connecting while you were talking right there, is that's exactly it. We are going to protect that which we love. And if we love our money, if we're Scrooge, if we're, a miser, we are going to protect our money at all costs because that's what we love. If we love our food, that's what we're going to protect. But if we love God, if we love our family, if we love that which is most important, our chastity, like we've already been talking about, and our morality, our integrity, and our character, that's what we are going to sacrifice for. That's what we are going to put in forth the time, and we are going to do to be men. And Mackie hits it. He talks about both being that protector starting as young as possible. And I love his comments to his son. I've done something very similar to my kids when I'm on vacation. I know I've looked at my 5-year-old son, my oldest son, and said, he's now 9, but I remember when he was 5 looking at him and saying something very similar, like, all right, you're the little man of the family now, and I think that's great because they step into it. They appreciate that, they experience that sort of gift from the Father that was just given to them verbally, and then they'll rise up to it. They start stepping into it. I know that it's not just as simple as that, but I think it was a really good call out for these archetypes that he's bringing to the front.
Exactly. So boys want to be men instinctively because they believe their fathers to be men. And when the biggest man in their life endows them with a responsibility, even at some level that may be artificial, but he apparently endows them with a responsibility to do what he's doing, they intuitively want to excel at that because they want to please their father. At the heart of being a son is wanting to please the father. This is like when God says that there's only a few times that God speaks in the New Testament, but he speaks definitively about Jesus. You are my beloved son with whom I'm well pleased. And right there in that statement, God is pronouncing his love and his pleasure in Jesus. These are two things that our boys need to hear from us. They need to know. They not only need to hear it, they need to know, A, I love you. I have chosen you.
Amen.
I didn't just I just didn't plant my seed in mom's, and you're the product. No, I choose you. I love you. And then the second thing is, I'm delighted by you. You please me. If our boys have those two things, they have massive confidence in their father. And then when the father says, go get him, Tiger, go do this, the son wants to respond by excelling at that. Mm-hmm. Because respect breeds respect. When you've got someone who's most respected, telling someone who respects that person to do something, he wants to do it so that he's respected.
Yes.
That's a soldier general kind of mentality. That's why priests, if they only knew the power that they have, like in their churches and their parishes, if they knew how much men actually respect them, regardless of scandals, all that stuff, men intuitively respect the general. So you got a priest who sacrificed his life to be in that role, that vocation. Men, if they're invited to come along with that priest to start a men's group or to go to the men's group or go to a holy hour where that priest is putting on specifically for the men will respond because they want to be respected by he who is most respected and revered.
Amen. Yeah, I think it's so good. And let's, I actually want to go back and I want to talk about the comment on humility that he stated. I didn't unintentionally slipped over that, but he starts that out by just saying, teaching my sons to be humble, and then like I don't give them Jordans. Don't actually know what internet fly shit is.
You need to brush up, man.
So I do. I am not with it. So fortunately, my kids aren't going to be doing it because I have no clue what that is. Or if they are, I'm going to be clueless. So no, but he commented on not giving them Jordans, but I want to talk about that virtue of humility that he brought in there, because you and I both know that humility is the kind of the foundation of all virtues, right? And that, charity being the pinnacle of them. And I thought that was really, really important for him to come in. And I beg the question of kind of like the people that he's around and the pride and arrogance that he's seen. What has affected him to the point of pushing for humility? Before that point that we started listening to in the episode, he was talking about the fact that all of those guys there on the pivot, and himself included, came from the hard knocks, came from a difficult upbringing, didn't have any money, and were needing to work their butt off to get ahead and to be successful. And so he came from this background, but you and I both know that the humble man is the virtuous man, is the man that has the opportunity to succeed because he places himself rightly in God's creation. Now, I don't know anything about Mackie's faith life, but I did find it very important and very astute for him in his first response about saying that he is raising his sons to be men, that humility is that virtue that he is trying to instill upon them.
Yeah. But so the question is why would anyone ever want to be humble?
Yeah.
I mean, so the humble guy is the one who's looked over for, supposedly he's looked over for the promotion. The humble guy is the one who never speaks out on behalf of himself to promote himself, and so he's overlooked. He's the one who maybe isn't seen by the women because he's not posturing and he's not, putting himself out there in a way that's attractive, or maybe he's not actually dominating or winning and being loud and proud. And so why would anyone ever want to be humble, right? But I think that's like a bit false, though, because yes, while the humble man isn't loud and proud and he doesn't shove his achievements in everybody's face, because he knows who he is, that's what humility is knowing who you are and accepting who you are, but then in your weaknesses, leaning on the strength of someone who's greater than you, which is God. And then when people are around someone who is confident in themselves and confident in God, they're stable. Even in their weaknesses and insufficiencies and inadequacies, people intuitively respect that person. So true humility is just this, not only self-awareness, but self-acceptance. And that self-acceptance is not only self-acceptance of my strengths, but also my weaknesses. And when I understand my own weaknesses, then I don't try to cover them up, because that's pride. And they say, like, we've said this before, but pride is like bad breath. Everybody knows you have it except for you. Yeah, and so one of the signs that you're prideful is you're constantly jockeying and trying to cover up your inadequacies. You're trying to cover up your limitations and your weaknesses, where the confident man, he's like, yeah, you know what? Struggle with that. Or not excelling in that. However, I'm going to keep going and risk this, knowing that someone else is going to aid me. I'm going to lean on other people to train me. And people love being around that person. And that person ends up being a success because the humble person is willing to risk and fail, whereas the prideful person isn't even willing to risk a lot of times for the fear of failure because they don't want the reputation to be tarnished.
Excellent. And I think that we should put some distinctions between defining cowardice and that person who is kind of doesn't have the strength within him. And I liked how you stated the humble man understands what he is strong, where his strength lies and where his weakness lies. I think that's so good because magnanimity is understanding our strength and understanding that it comes from God. Whatever that gift or talent might be, whatever we are good at, comes from God. And therefore, we have a responsibility to use that strength for God's kingdom. Use that strength for whatever it is that God wills us to do. We are responsible and we are obligated to use that to the best of its ability. It's not foolishness to know when you have been gifted at writing. It's not foolishness to know when you have been gifted at business, for instance, or math, or having a brain that can digest tons of information, high-level information simultaneously, and then be able to remember it, and then be able to recite it or direct it after the fact clearly. Like, these things are gifts, that God has given us. And the humble man is not the person that ignores those, or, no, there's not. But he's also not the person that's like, I'm the best at this. Nobody else is better than me than this, right? That's the prideful man. It's the guy who is aware of his strengths and his weaknesses, is not using his weaknesses as an excuse, because he's going to keep on moving forward. He's going to keep on getting better. He's going to keep on relying on the Spirit to guide him. But he also knows his strength. So I really appreciate you bringing that in there, because when it comes to the nature of virtues, we don't get it all wrong, but there's definitely so much misunderstanding. When it comes to humility, there really is that understanding that you just have to be a doormat that people walk over, and that, a pushover, because any stance of strength is somehow a stance of pride. We have to be passive, and then we call it humility, when really it's just cowardice. It's just a weakness disguised as humility.
Yeah, humility without magnanimity is pretty much useless.
Yes.
And that magnanimity is large-heartedness. And this goes back to your Chesterton quote. It's not that you're fighting against something you hate as much as you're fighting for that which you love, which is behind you. I get that. I think that's really good, because this is where it really comes down to, is like, so when you said that quote, we sacrifice for that which we love, we fight for that which we love. This is, if you do not allow yourself to be loved, especially by God, then you're only, in a sense, loving the self that you hate. And then when you fight for anything, you're only fighting for yourself. So then you become a bully. But if I fight for that which I love, which is God, which is my wife, which is my children, then I'm going to love myself. I'm going to love God. And then my fight is going to be real fight. I'm not going to be fighting for myself. I'm going to be fighting for others. And that's when magnanimity becomes evident. But if I'm just fighting for myself and fighting for my personal rights, or what I think is owed to me, that can become pretty shallow pretty fast. And that's not humility.
Yeah, no, so good. Moving forward, let's talk about respect. I know you touched on respect, and I think it's important for us to go in, especially as it relates from fathers to sons, because it's we had a conversation of 5 things that every son needs from his father. And one of those points was respect. And we have Mackie here talking about respect and bringing it up in a way that you can tell he trusts. Not only he's calling his sons to something greater, he believes that they can do it. He respects them for it.
Well, that's the key.
Yeah. And so to read things, and I read a lot of comments that said, well, now I know why I hate Anthony Mackie. And, he's obviously an abusive father. I saw one comment saying Child Protective Services should be paying attention to this, and then one said, top 10 reasons of why sons hate their fathers is because they forced them into stuff. And then this same comment went as far, I don't have it in front of me, but this comment went as far to say, if he wants to be alpha such and such, man that does whatever in this area of life, he should be allowed to be that. And I was like, where are you getting this from? Like, what triggers, who hurt you? And it's like, where are you getting these triggers from? But coming back to it is that our sons need to be prepared for the world. They need to believe that they have the strength within them to be a protector, that they have the wherewithal and ability within them to handle what life throws at them without losing their emotions.
But John, why do we need to teach our kids to be protectors when we have protective services that can come in? The government can come in and protect our family. Give me a break. It's like, okay, yeah, this is the mentality of our culture. It's like, okay, I'm not going to provide for my family. I'll allow the government to provide for my family. Oh, I'm not going to protect my family. I'll allow the government to protect my family. That argument is so unreasonable, because all it is saying, okay, so our culture is saying, oh, we would respect Anthony Mackie if he shirked his responsibility to protect and provide. No, all those same people would come crashing down on him too. So These are people who all they have time to do is criticize someone else who's actually being responsible.
Yes. It's the man in the arena situation, the Teddy Roosevelt thing.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what? Anthony said that. And when he said, we are experiencing the death of the American male. And he said, and however that makes you feel, you're going to feel. It's like he's been in these circles so much that he knows by stating that, but he did it anyways, because that's what men do, right? We don't hide truth behind feelings and behind possibly offending somebody. We speak truth charitably. We speak truth boldly. We speak truth with clarity and articulation, actually, as well as Anthony did. He didn't have, this wasn't a class where he was teaching all the different areas of virtues and all the different aspects of masculinity and the different archetypes beyond provider and protector. He was speaking from the heart of how he's raising his sons. And I think it resonated. If we're being candid, most of the comments loved what he had to say.
Right.
Because it's written within our heart, right?
So he's talking about respect and how to impart respect or respect his own son so they respect him. So it's all about power, right? And then what happens is most of the culture says, oh, I respect him. I respect that viewpoint. And the people who are on the polar opposite extreme on this are disrespecting him because they disrespect not Mackie, but they disrespect respect. That's what's really coming. Because respect is all about true power. It's about hierarchy and authority. So you respect people based on the hierarchy of dignity, and you respect people based on the hierarchy of authority. God is the highest authority. Therefore, we should respect and reverence God. Nobody wants, atheists, agnostics, immoralists, they don't want to respect God because that means he would have authority over their life. But when we see people who are respectful and respecting, we understand they're a person of authority. It's authority well understood.
Yeah, dignity and authority. I think that is good commenting on. You said that we respect people in the order of their dignity and we respect people in the order of their authority. And I think that is a really good pathway to reflect on. I couldn't have spoken that myself, Devin, so I appreciate you saying that, because the end is that respect, we have to know we respect everyone, but there are levels, wouldn't you say, right? There's levels and degrees, and you gave a perfect categorization, authority and dignity, for us to put forth that respect towards others. I'm appreciating this and just digesting it.
Okay, so if I'm called to respect others for their dignity and authority, And I am called to be respected for my own dignity and the authority that God has given me. This is very important. We've talked about this before, but respect in the Latin, re and then specere, is literally, in a sense, to see again. It is so pivotal and so fundamental to the whole sphere of respect that I'm able to see myself anew, not through the mirror of the world. The mirror of the world, oh, I see my neighbor who's got the new truck. It reflects back to me, I don't have the new truck. I stink. The neighbor's got the great house. It reflects back to me that I don't have the great house. Oh, I'm less. The neighbor has 1.5 million views on YouTube. I don't. I'm less. That's the world mirror. Okay. The world mirror is constantly conditioning us to disrespect ourselves. However, the God mirror is the comparison. We compare ourselves to the Son of God, and the Son of God is always like, you can be more in me, not less. And when we begin to see ourselves anew, specere, see ourselves anew through the vision of Christ, then we respect ourselves and the authority that God has given us over ourselves, our office, our families, our marriage. And then what happens is we're able to speak encouragement and hope into other people's lives. And what happens is we respect their dignity and even possibly their authority, but they end up respecting us because we are already men of respect, because we respect the authority of God that's been given to us, and we see ourselves in that relationship through that lens.
Yeah. What about these individuals that are constantly disrespecting Anthony, for instance, and what we're just saying? Let's further identify that. I'm really liking what you're talking about here. And so you expect that respect in return. You expect that respect in return, and justifiably so, because of the dignity and or authority that God has granted you. But when you don't get that, when it's constantly disrespected, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So, well, first off, in the com box, the people who are disrespecting Anthony Mackie and calling him names and a homophobic and all that stuff, when he didn't even talk about that, what's going on? Those people basically don't have respect in their own lives. Most likely. They're not respected and they don't respect themselves. And so they're angry and that bubbles over. And then they want somebody else to feel disrespected because misery loves company. The very sins that we accost others with, okay, whatever weapon of sin we're using upon others is the very thing that we are guilty of. So what I mean by that is if I'm accusing someone of being insecure, most likely I'm insecure. If I'm accusing Anthony Mackie of abusing his authority, most likely I've abused my own authority and taken no authority over my life. These people lack confidence, therefore they're shunned and they recoil at Anthony Mackie's confidence. Okay? So now back to your question. Your question was, how do we deal with people when they disrespect us?
Yes.
Well, this is very important. Now, we're all weak, okay? So we're going to make mistakes from time to time. And I'm guilty of this. However, if I respect myself and I see myself anew through the lens of God, and I know who I am in my relationship with him, and I derive my strength not from the identity of the world, but my identity as a son of God in the Son of God, Jesus Christ, and I'm living there, and I'm strong there, and I trust there, then when someone disrespects me, I can almost laugh it off. It's almost laughable. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to sting. It doesn't mean that there might not even be a little bit of truth to what they're saying. And this is what the man of strength, when someone disrespects him or someone criticizes him or critiques him, the man of strength is always capable of going into the comment, divorcing his emotions from it and divorcing the person even from the comment. And he's able to look at that comment and go, is some of that true? And then he takes that and he considers it. And I love it so many times. Like just a little story. One time I was giving a seminar on the theology body over a course of 8 weeks. And there was a woman at our discussion table. We had tons of people there. And this woman, she was a little bit older and she kind of took a shining to me. She liked me and she started calling me at home and all this stuff and wanting like this friendship. And I just was so busy with my kids. I couldn't really give her what she wanted. Well, I was in the confessional line Saturday morning and there she is. And she said right outside the confessional, she said, "You're a phony." You're just a total phony. You give these presentations and act like you love God, and yet you're just a phony. And
Ooh.
and
Satan
so
knows how to cut deep. Yeah.
yeah. And it was so cool. God gave me the grace because I looked at her and I just thought about it for it didn't even take more than really a split second, but in my mind and in my heart, it probably felt like it was 5 minutes because I was going to the Lord with it. And I was like, Lord, what do you have to say about this? And he's like, Devin, there are parts of you that are not phony and there are parts of you that are. And so I was just like, you know what? You're right. And she just was like, she didn't know how to respond. She didn't respond. She just was silent. And then I went to the confessional and it was so cool because I don't know how long it was, that maybe it was a week or two or whatever that passed, but she apologized to me. She said, I was wrong. You're not a phony. You're actually real, and I think that I'm not saying I'm a confident man, but when we go to the Lord for identity and not the world, I wasn't going to her saying, well, why do you think I'm a phony? What is your assessment of me? Why are you criticizing me? Who are you to do that? No, I just turned to the God who is truth himself and look in that mirror. And I'm like, okay, what's the truth here? Fine. Okay. Excellent. I have something to work on.
So good. If I can recite this back to you, I think I'm going to use an analogy of clothes that we're wearing, right? Like when we understand truth, and the more we understand truth, the less these things affect us. And the more we're living in truth, the less these things affect us. So for instance, if somebody came to me and I'm wearing a black shirt and they say, you look like an idiot wearing that red shirt, well, it wouldn't bother me because I'm not wearing a red shirt. I know that it's a black shirt. Now, if I was wearing a black shirt and they came to me and said, you look like an idiot wearing that black shirt, I'd have to reflect on it a little bit more because there's a level closer to truth in the fact that they got the color right, and I'd have to discern that. Now, this same sort of comparison can go over to our character and our integrity. But when we have our identity rightly defined, when we have who we are as men, when we are doing the hard work of going to prayer, of going to confession, of going to the Eucharist, of talking to our friends about difficulties and struggles in our lives that we are working towards, when we understand those, the more we understand those things rightly, the more when somebody comes to you and they just say some sort of subjective ad hominem attack, it affects us less because we know the truth of things and we're living in that. And so even in your situation, you first knew that you could turn to God and talk to him first and foremost. And second, that, you realize at the end of the day, I'm not that great. Like, I think about that all the time within the Catholic Gentleman here and comments that come out. It's like, I was pretty well prepared for that episode 5 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to respond like this. And who knows? In 5 years' time, I might have forgotten the details. Like, Lord, if it's not for your grace, I'm nothing. And having that understanding does bring peace and protects us from kind of the emotional baggage that comes with people's, attacks and people's opinions and comments that they're projecting on us oftentimes from a place of wound, a place of hurt, a place of unknown, a place of discomfort and or maybe even brainwashed into another alter reality that they have been living in for years.
That's exactly right. Wounded people wound people, hurting people hurt people. And people who are healthy and confident do not go around hurting other people. They just don't have any desire for it. There's no bottled up anger that has to just come out and rage upon people because I'm so discontent with my life. And I like the clothing analogy. It's really, really good because the red shirt, the black shirt. I'm wearing a black shirt. Someone says, you look stupid in that red shirt. Well, they're not in reality. But the black shirt, why am I an idiot in the black shirt? Yeah. And what happens is, though, in that moment, there's a bit of shame. And I think that we could even take it further with the clothing analogy to clothing, no clothes. So Adam and Eve, no shame. Why? Rooted in their identity with God. As soon as they sin, and then like someone just said to me, who told you you were naked?
Yeah.
Well, somebody shamed them. One or the other, or both, or Satan or whoever shamed the other. They began to objectify the other. And therefore, there was a critical nature that became involved there. Bottom line, they cover themselves up with clothing. Okay. So, but the point though is why do we cover up? And why why are we ashamed of our nakedness is because we're ashamed of our true identity. Why are we ashamed of our true identity? It's because we're appealing to the world for that identity, which is what Eve did and Adam did.
That's right.
So anytime that we feel a lack of confidence, I believe the root is because we've appealed to a worldly standard somewhere.
Yeah. So good. So I want to say, just kind of wrapping up here, that we have Anthony Mackie who comes out and he says, I'm raising my sons to be real men. We're experiencing over the last 2 decades the death of the American male. And then he provides for us a little bit of a guidance, right? He starts with humility, one virtue, but he starts with the virtue, which is great. And we would say here at the Catholic Gentleman that there's a lot of other virtues that all have to work in tandem and cohort with each other. And, we have a lot of episodes on those things. The next thing, he goes in and he talks about these archetypes and pulling out particularly the protector and the provider archetypes that we've talked about as well. And so good for him for that. And then he finishes with this need for respect and this examples and how he is respecting his sons, not only through his example, but all through what he is requiring them to live into and to live up to. And I think that's so great. And so what would you say is lacking, and not by a way of critique of Anthony Mackie, but by way of adding a fullness to what he stated? What are some of the things that he is lacking on what it means to be a real man?
Yeah, good question. I don't know the man personally, so I don't know his worldview. But if we're just to take that short interview, which isn't really fair, and take his words in that interview and then say, well, what's missing in that? Obviously, what is missing is a spiritual worldview. So the thing that needs to be most protected is the soul. The thing that needs to be most guarded is another person's soul. I'm not raising my kids for this world. God help me if I am. I'm raising my kids for eternity. And so it's my job. See, I think that this is where we get the protection thing all wrong. It's like, okay, so I give my kid, a 9mm. Okay, you're good, man. You've got what it takes. You've got your weapon. And let's say I even train my kid to shoot well, and I've even trained him to be responsible with the gun. You're good. You're protected. No more needs to be done. But what about Netflix? What about pornography? What about the fact that the average, 9-year-old, most 9-year-old boys now have seen, 80% have seen pornography on their cell phones? What is it about? What kind of things am I letting in my home as far as my anger, my vengeance, my judgmentalism, my critical nature of the church or politics or the Pope or whatever? I think more importantly, what we need to make our children aware of is that they have to protect themselves from themselves.
Yeah.
Just as I need to protect myself from myself, for God.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the big component. I don't know if it's missing in his life, but I would just say, look, there's got to be a spiritual worldview. Otherwise, it's all, who cares?
Thank you, Devin.
We're living for this world.
Yeah, we didn't prepare for this point in the conversation together. And I had brought up the exact same thing. Let's all pray for Anthony Mackie. Let's pray in Thanksgiving that he's speaking truth in such a
Amen.
High,
bold.
Yeah, exactly. And in a world that disagrees with him, especially in kind of as an actor, as a celebrity, that even disagrees with him all the more, that he still speaks out for the sake of his sons and for the sake of truth. So let's all pray for him, and that God might grace him with the gift of faith or increases his faith, whatever that might be. But that was exactly it, is that, a man rightly orders his life to God, and he is moving to make sure that right order is between himself and God, and then himself internally, and then himself and others, or others and internally, simultaneously. And so he does a great job, touching on a lot of those. And yeah,
I think something that's very important, which he said, and I like this, is that if you notice what he's calling his, in a sense, his son to be a guardian of, or he's talking about guardianship or protection, it's about relationships. He says, or provision. He says, when you grow up, you're going to provide for your mom. They know that they're supposed to provide for their mom. When they're guarding the house, they're protecting the other kids. They're protecting mom, whatever. The point that he's making is it's a protection and provision for relationship. Notice he says, hey, I don't care if you're a celebrity. What does that celebritism, whatever, mean if everything is gone? What is everything? The relationships. I don't care how much money you have. He's saying your house, whatever. If someone breaks it, that's gone. And they take away your relationship, or if they take away your relationship and that remains, what do you have? Nothing. He says it doesn't matter. That's a good viewpoint. That's more of a spiritual viewpoint, because he's touching upon the fact that the way to joy, the way to happiness, and the reality that we live in is relationship. If I'm just protecting things, to hell with that.
Agreed. Yeah, so good. So here we are nearing the end of our episode, where I like to talk about putting on the new man. We, if you're listening to this in the month of March, are nearing midpoint of Lent, right? And so I want to encourage you. The challenge this week is to double down. If you have been fasting 1 day a week, fast 2 days a week. If you have been giving up soda and chocolate and Thanksgiving for God, the Creator, so that you can become closer to Him, find something else to give up. If you are, if you are not giving up social media after dinner, do that. Find something that you can further abstain from or avoid for the sake of growing in oneness with Christ, our Savior. And do it for that reason as well. Don't just give it up as some sort of white knuckle machismo, pride that you get to the end and you did all these things. No, we do it with that hopeful anticipation of Christ, with that hopeful anticipation of enjoying whatever it is that you gave up during Easter, so that we can be more thankful to God the Creator, who gives us these provisions in our lives. And so that is what I want to end for putting on the new man. Devin, thanks so very much for this conversation.
You bet, brother.
I really appreciate it. And so our listeners, if you liked what we had to say, please share this with a friend that could use it. If you like some of the pillars and the conversation points and you think that they can benefit from it, it does us a great service. And we couldn't be more thankful for you doing that, because that's the number one way that this podcast gets out to more men in need. If you want to keep on helping the world through the Catholic Gentleman, become better men, become saints, the work that we are setting out for, please consider donating for our studio space at catholicgentleman.com/support. And thanks for listening in as we end each of our episodes.
Be a man, be a saint.